Hi, and welcome to the first episode of my podcast, Social Distancing the Church. I'm here with Reverend Grant Gunnink of Valley View Church. And so I'll introduce Grant here. He's a pastor of a small church, Valley View Community Church in the southwest of Calgary. Church attendance is about 70 a week. Is that correct, Grant?
Between 50 and 70 a week.
50 and 70? Okay, yeah. And so, for context for the listeners, Valley View is the church that I have attended for the past 3 years. So I have formed a relationship with Grant, being that it's a small church. And I also did my ministry practicum at Valley View. And so, yeah, we have an already established relationship, and I have an understanding of the ministry at Valley View. And also for context, when I checked yesterday, Calgary is in stage 1 of Alberta's reopening phase because Alberta delayed Calgary and Brooks. And so they entered phase 1 on June 1st. And religious services are 50 people or 30% capacity, whichever one is smaller. And some other restrictions as well, such as mask coverings if there's congregational singing, and of course social distancing, and several others. Is there anything else you want to add there, Grant?
In terms of what they've allowed for phase 1 opening for religious gatherings, I think they're also, when I read the guidelines there, they're recommending if you're 65 or older that you stay home and do not attend. And yes, the congregational singing is a no. They don't want you doing that. So, and no childcare offered as well. They're saying don't offer any childcare at this point either. So.
What I've heard recently is they're now allowing congregational singing if masks are worn.
Okay.
But yeah, it's still kind of iffy with masks. So I'll go into the first kind of question. How did you transition to not being able to hold services in person? Because as churches were unable to hold in person, each church kind of developed their own plan. So how did you approach it, and what is your setup like for online services? Because you are a more tech competent person, so you could speak more of the tech
Yeah.
aspect as well.
Yeah. So when we heard that they were recommending that we not meet, I think the first week we still met. I think they were capping it at 50 the first week when they started putting in restrictions, and that wouldn't necessarily be a problem for us because, with some people being nervous and not wanting to come, we weren't going to hit the 50 limit anyways. So I think we had one more service that we held in person, and then we switched. So when I heard that, I was already thinking, okay, if we can't meet in person, what are we going to do? I'd been part of a group that had been meeting online because we have membership all across Canada, a board for an organization that I chair, and we use GoToMeeting for that. So I was right away thinking, how do we adapt and use GoToMeeting for a worship service? We could do that quite easily. We'll just give everybody a link, and we can come online and we can work together. We'd actually tried making our services available online via GoToMeeting in the past, and ran into some technical transmission challenges with the music, and freezing up the AV computer. I think you were there when we did that.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, and so I thought, well, we could do this, but how do we get around some of those challenges, the technical challenges of broadcasting? So um, yeah, we I was thinking, we'll do this online, with GoToMeeting. I mean, it's the same. It's relatively the same as Zoom. I
Yeah.
just happen to use GoToMeeting. So yeah, that's what we did. And then with the technical side of things, um, I was thinking maybe we would have a better opportunity. Maybe the music would come through a little better, because the music was always garbled and delayed, and so I was investigating a little bit how to do that, and found a USB mixer that would take the conversion load from the audio to digital off the computer, and do that off-site. So yeah, we were able to find a little digital mixer, sorry, a USB mixer that we could plug into the computer and take the feed from the board off of there and transmit that. That seemed to help a fair bit. I mean, the music still isn't great in terms of quality, and it largely depends on the participants' own computer speed and internet speed and modem processor speed, all that kind of stuff. But it's enough to get by for now. So yeah. Um, that I mean, that was the process when this all happened. It was like, okay, how do we, we can use GoToMeeting. Let's figure out how we do this and sort that out. So
Yeah. And one other thing, back in April, you were experimenting with people leading from home, where you would loan out church equipment if need be, and instead of them coming to the church to lead, because it is video calling software, they were able to lead from home. So what does that entail, and are you still doing a system like that, or?
yeah. So we we switched over to leading from home for two reasons. One, I had the I had the band schedule worked out for all of March, and when we were going through this transition of trying to figure this out, to just be able to keep the band meeting and playing together was kind of one less thing that I had to deal with, um, to sort things out. And so we kept having the band, which was scheduled to play all of March, meet up until the end of March. And but about that time, things started to get a little more serious too, and I actually started to get one or two folks in the congregation who were concerned about singing together. And subsequently, we've learned how singing is, a more aerosol producing activity, and choirs are certainly more high risk activity, I guess they would call it. Now, we don't have a choir; we just have one person singing on in the band, so it's not as not as bad. But we decided to have some of the people in our roster who lead worship lead from home, because of that, but also because they themselves were in high risk situations. One of the leaders, her mom is a nurse, and as I started thinking about, getting people together, and who would be in um, a more risky position to come out. One of the other worship leaders, his wife works in a long-term nursing care home, and he has a son who's just recently recovered from being in the hospital for quite a long time for health reasons. And so, so as not to expose them and not to have them be exposed, exposing to others, we decided to have them lead from home. And two things happened there. The one young lady, she had purchased a USB mic, the Yeti Blue, I believe it was, that she had, and for some other online stuff that she does for music teaching and things like that. So we tried it with her mic, and in her situation, that USB mic actually works quite well. She has a digital keyboard. She also has an upright piano. The first couple of times we had her leading, she was using the upright piano, and then we just tried to get a read of the room off the mic, and see how that would work. And it worked okay, with her vocals, picking up her vocals and her and the piano. And it was just a matter of in the sound check saying, okay, well, play softer and sing louder, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And so that worked well. We refined that even further for her, by getting her electronic keyboard set up, and then finding a place in the room. Actually, she eventually ended up placing the microphone over in the corner down near the couches, where there was more fabric and close to the carpet. And so when she did that, we managed to place the mic in a position where it wasn't picking up as much as of the natural reverb of the room, and cut down the high end frequencies a little bit more. So the pickup was clearer in that location. So for that one, we had to play with microphone placement in the room once she got a USB extension cord to keep that going longer. So that one worked out all right. We had the other fellow. I rented a 2-channel compressor from Long and McQuaid, and then the USB mic that we had purchased for the church, and headphones and a mic. And he's got a the classic little Casio keyboard with the drum machine and everything in it. And so we've had him run the vocal mic into one channel of the compressor, and the keyboard into the other channel of the compressor, and we've monkeyed around with the settings a fair bit, and we've been able to have that set up running into the USB mixer, and then the USB mixer into the computer, and that has produced a fairly good sound as well too. And he's able to have the drums play on his track, and play bass on the left hand and keys on the right hand, and so we get a nice little full sound coming through the mix there. One of the things we noticed is that he has 2 laptops, a work laptop and a personal laptop. The work laptop is much higher processing speed, and so when he used his old laptop, we were struggling with getting a clean sound. Using the higher end laptop really helped quite a bit. So compression settings, we're finding that the key in the compression seems to be setting the ratio anywhere between 4:1 to 14:1. And then the other thing is that even though you instinctively would think you want the compression to kick in right away, we've had to back that off a little bit, and also feather out the release on the compression as well too. So I've never been a big compression user prior to this. It's there. I actually have a compressor in my rack in my home studio, but I've never really had an application where I've been forced to really learn and fine tune it like you do with, say, EQ or reverb or something like that. So the compression is it's key to really getting something coming through half decently on this. But yeah, the GoToMeeting and the Zoom platforms, they're not made for streaming music, not like Facebook Live. So it's a different platform, different allocation for what the bandwidth is using for all the users. So that's what we've done. The other thing that was really interesting is we had another person that we were going to have lead from their home, and we took the compressor and the USB mixer and from the other fellow's home. After, of course, we gave everything a wipe down with bleach, and the microphone stayed with the fellow who was using it. Everybody gets and keeps their own microphones these days. So we brought it over to his house and we set it up, and we thought we had it working, and then we had one Sunday morning where we tested it on the Thursday night. We seemed to have it working, and Sunday morning it was just it was a gong show. It would not come through cleanly. It was always swelling in and out and dropping, and just could not figure out why that was. And so the following Sunday, I had them come to the church, just the two of them, and we streamed them from the church, and that worked much better. And the only thing I can think of is that, and this is where I think I learned about one more link in the chain, right? Because you're only as good as your weakest link, and perhaps maybe some links are more important than others. The modem actually is important, and at the church we recently had the modem replaced, maybe in November in the fall. So we've got a brand new modem at the church. So even though our upload speed at the church is at the time it was less than 1, we've subsequently managed to get it upgraded to 10, which is maybe about 8 or 9 on a good day. Even though it was a very low upload speed, our modem is very, very efficient, and I'm using a high-end computer, so that works. Whereas even though he has a high-end computer at his house, their modem is old, and I think that's what was preventing a clean upload from the signal. It couldn't handle it. So that's the other thing that I've learned with that. So it's worked well, and with the exception of that one person who had a really old modem. So it's worked well. We've learned a few things technically along the way, but yeah, it's certainly freed up some of my time because I'm not running band practices at the church on Wednesday nights. So
yeah, and that's two things that I want to add on there. Is like the argument for like video calling has some great strengths, but one of the things is like it's not built for streaming music, so it seems like running a hardware compressor seems to be working well for you guys, because then you don't have the software trying to be like, how do I compress music that it's not built for, but instead you're giving them a compressed signal so they don't have to try and compress. So yeah. That seems like a really good idea. And secondly, yeah, the whole internet stability thing, that's very much a thing. Like whenever I stream, like at Ambrose, I was talking with IT and they're like, you're right by a router, you should have good Wi-Fi. And I was like, yeah, I want Ethernet just because that stability's there, right? With Wi-Fi, you never know what it's going to do, but you hardwire a connection in, it just adds that stability. Even at Valley View, that first time we streamed, I borrowed a 100-foot Ethernet cable from a friend, and I just ran it across the foyer because it just gives that slight boost that sometimes just puts you over the edge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm as we continue on, that's something I'm going to be looking into is having some hardwire stuff there as opposed to relying on the wireless signal. So, but I'm going to be curious though. I want to look into what my output on my laptop would be in terms of megabits or whatever as compared to the wireless, because sometimes the way they build them, they assume everybody's going to be using the wireless, which people do. So the wireless actually runs higher than a hardwired signal would, but it can come and go and drop as well. So I gotta check that out.
So the next thing I kind of want to talk about is what aspects of online services do you enjoy? Because, like, while there's definitely some drawbacks, there's some great strengths we can have in online format. So, what have you been enjoying in this online format? And how has technology been applied in creative or new ways to glorify God and minister to people?
Um, well, I think just to answer that last question first, I think obviously just being able to use the format to continue to have a group of people getting together for a worship service, that it's just it's that's the glorifying God, and doing that in creative ways to, excuse me, find out how we can sing and pray and praise together, and encourage each other and that kind of a thing. So just the application of using it for a worship service, I think, is certainly creative and new. And in doing that, the creative part has to come with um, looking at the format and going, okay, so what works well here online and what doesn't work well online. Um, so the one of the things that I've enjoyed, and ties right into what works well online, is I've enjoyed being able to get people from the congregation to participate in the service more. Um, the ability to come in and pray, for example, is much easier online than it is in person, um, due to the fact that the person's right there speaking into a microphone, and all they see, oh, and some of them don't even see all the faces on the screen, right? Depending on what sort of device you're using, you might only see 6 things on the screen. So I think people are less hesitant to do this because it's not quite the same as public speaking. It is when you're in a group of people. So I've had people who I would have never asked before to come up to the front and say a prayer. I've asked them to participate in doing a prayer in the service, and they're doing quite well with it. So I really enjoy seeing people participating that way. And so we've added in prayers. We're doing a lot more praying in the service as a result of that. Whereas if we were to do that meeting in person, we would have to make sure that the person would have to stand up on the spot, and someone would have to run over with a microphone to let them speak through the PA system, or they would have to speak really loudly, and some people may hear them or may not hear them, or they would have to come all the way up to the front. Which, I mean, and all these things are doable, but when you're meeting live in person, there's that physicality of transporting you bodily from one place to another that has to take place, and you have to factor all that in and how that's going to go smoothly. Whereas when you're meeting online, the person's they're right there, they can just jump right in and they can pray. And so I've really enjoyed being able to get more people praying in the service online that way. And what else do I enjoy about it? Well, aside from being able to create kind of the satisfaction of going, we figured out a solution to this, right? And being able to do that. I think the fact that we can have some of our congregants who are not with us in the city here be able to join in. Some of our Nigerian families, where the family lives here, the husband's back in Nigeria working, we've had them able to join in regularly. My parents join in regularly now as well too. So one of the things I guess I've enjoyed is being able to have that opportunity for people to come and visit us online. Makes it a lot easier to do that. And I enjoy the greeting time as well too. being able to recognize who's online and say hello, and then have them come on and greet people. Um, there's especially at the beginning, there's a real sense of, hey, I'm connecting with people, and people were eager to connect as well too. Now, obviously, as time goes on, things tend to lose their novelty, and you have to be bringing some real substance in it. Otherwise, it's just, the novelty wears off, and people are like, oh, whatever. So those are some of the things that I enjoy about being online with the congregation for worship service. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of what I'm getting from this is you're enjoying the lack of physical restrictions in a sense because you don't have to worry about transition times, right? Like in the physical, there's transition times as people move, but on an online, you can minimize your transition times and, in a sense, create a more time efficient service.
Well, that's actually true. I mean, I've noticed that I can time it to the minute now, because we start at 10. I'm watching the clock, and I'll be like, okay, welcome, we're starting, and we'll go through the things, and then I can see on the video log when we actually stopped and when I actually closed the program down, right? And it's, we're 10 after 11, 11:16, right around that time there, right? And so I know we're running more efficiently right now because we don't have some of those things. The other thing is that we don't show the video. We don't do as much of a soft start, right? When we're meeting physically, we're waiting. Valley View. We have people who show up at 10 o'clock, and then we have everyone who arrives for the 20 after 10 service. And we still have some of that online, but not as much. The people are much better about logging on, a little bit beforehand, or coming in at maybe 5 after, 7 after type of thing, but not a lot of this 20 after, 10:30 business where we're waiting for people. And so we can get started sooner, in some sense, than we can when we meet in person, and we have the soft start where it's like, okay, well, let's wait another 3 or 4 minutes before we have the band, so we don't do a performance song to start off the service, to kind of have that soft start. We're not doing an opening video because I have not figured out yet how to stream video via GoToMeeting. Like, we can share the screen with the PowerPoint on it, but I don't know if video would transmit, and even if it did, then we have to figure out how to get the audio transmitting from that video, which is a whole problem in itself as well too. So yeah, we don't have that soft start where people physically are coming in still. So that, yeah, it's more efficient in that way. Whereas a normal service, if we're not, normal services, we can run till 11:25, 11:30 sometimes, right? And but this is quicker, and the offering goes much faster as well too, because everybody's doing it on the Giving app or online, whereas otherwise we're waiting for ushers to pass the plate around, and that's not going to come back anytime soon. So
Yeah. So you've kind of touched on this of like adaptations you have decided to make in transitioning to an online format, such as including more people praying. But what adaptations to your service was made for you? Where instead of you being like, hey, I want to try this, it's instead being like, some aspects just completely flopping in an online format, and you have been forced to change part of your service.
I think the using video has just that's out. Because it does not transmit. If we were if we were producing a video for people to watch, we could certainly do that. We could, we could drop that video piece in there. But for the group meeting, no, the video sections are done. They're gone. The other thing that I don't necessarily think works as well online is having PowerPoint bullets for your sermons, for the messages. It's PowerPoint has become very much in person. We use it to kind of back us up, kind of as a focal point to sort of help people visually sort of see where we are in the service. Online, it's way more informative in terms of like, let's make the lyrics available for people as they want to sing. But I don't think it adds what it does when you're in person, when you're preaching. So I just make a placeholder slide for the sermon, and that stays up while I'm preaching. Because I think as people are trying to look at a screen and watch you, they're already looking at something visual. And so if you're going to be, if they're watching on the screen, and then you've got your camera feeds, and your one little camera feed and about 6 or 7 or whatever's on their screen, maybe they've got the whole 35 feeds up or whatever, and then they've got the bullet point at the bottom. They're concentrated on watching you, and not necessarily watching the PowerPoint slide. I just don't think it has that impact that it does when you're speaking in person, and when you're listening to someone in person there with it. So the PowerPoint really has taken a much less much less significant place. And in some sense, I think when we meet in person, and before, when we were meeting in person, PowerPoint and the video was kind of like, this is how we're trying to bring video in, or how can we use this to augment it? Whereas now everything is video. So the service is the PowerPoint now in some sense, with that. So those are two areas where I found that things have been it forces you to change because of the medium.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because like so many pastors are doing like a picture in picture where a part of their screen is their PowerPoint, and they've just continued using a PowerPoint for their sermon, and they haven't really considered, or some may not have considered, how well does a PowerPoint work online versus in person. Like, I would never have considered, oh, that's not, or that's something that's effective in person but not online. Like, that just surprises me.
Yeah, well, and most of the time, it depends on what you want to use PowerPoint to begin with, right? Like in person, you're trying to, you've got a captive audience there in person, right? They're not going to, maybe they'll wander and look around or whatever like that, but they're sitting there. There's no other distractions going on. You're speaking, you've got them there, and so to have that changing slide on the background every so often, where you're like making a point and you put that point up there to kind of anchor it, and keep that in front of them while you're explaining or moving on, right? So or if you're trying to deal with the concept and you try to explain it, and it's helpful to have a visual to explain it, then the visual slide it's a very helpful thing. But if you think about it, your audience, when they're at home, they're not a captive audience. They can click their camera off. They can be noodling on Facebook. I mean, they could do that in church too, right? They can pull out their phones, but I mean, that's a little bit more obvious that you're on your phone in the middle of the sermon. And I just trust that everybody who's doing that at Valley View is looking up scripture passages. But you know, you don't have a captive audience when you're doing it via GoToMeeting, right? Or online like this, because people can be looking at other things. There's other distractions that can be going on in their home environment, and so yeah, I they're trying enough, I think, to concentrate on watching and listening to you, then and I don't think it's necessarily negative to try to do the picture in picture. I've seen that a few times as well too, and personally I find it distracting more than helpful, because it's it's I'm the service is the PowerPoint in that sense. Now there has been a couple of times where I've been doing some messages where I'm like, I'm dealing with a complex topic, and I could see where I at some point I could say, okay, this is here, I want to show you what this looks like, and so can we bring up that visual right now? Okay, do you see that on your screen, right? But that then I'm really breaking to highlight that, and people would then be like, oh, okay, I'm going to look at that. Yeah, I see what you're saying. And then I would continue on. I might leave it up for a little bit and then go, have it just go back to the placeholder slide, which would in sense give them permission to start engaging with my little box on the screen that they're watching again, as opposed to trying to watch something that's changing every 3 or 4 minutes and go, oh, what was that? Oh, did that? Okay, well, that's what he said. Okay, I'll go back to watching him now, type of thing. So
so just gonna how have you maintained a sense of community? Because like a big struggle churches are facing is, how do you maintain community? Because you can't, like, a big source of community in a church is in the foyer after service, where people can like break off into their friend groups and talk. But like, it's also, if somebody wants to join the conversation, they can just physically walk forward, and it's not one big communal conversation. It's multiple pockets that you can just move around as wanted. So how have you maintained community?
Yep. That is a challenge, and certainly I recognize the advantage Valley View has being a small church, and the fact that going into this, we I would say have a high degree of community established already, and so in some sense we've got some credit in the bank to weather the storm, and so that's our advantage in this situation. Other congregations where they're large congregations, I can see the challenge that they would have with this. But one of the things that, the first thing that we did to continue to maintain community was that I deliberately decided I was not going to record a service and post it, for people to watch, whether they wait and say, oh, we're going to watch it at 10 o'clock so it feels more like church on Sunday morning, or whether they'd say, oh, you know what, I can sleep in, it'll be online afterwards, I'll watch it sometime later on during the day when it's convenient for me, or maybe I'll watch it Monday instead, or whatever. So the first decision that we made to continue the sense of community was to have the online meeting format where people can have their cameras on and we can see each other. So that was the first decision that we made to keep that sense of community. And people are reluctant to some people are reluctant to turn their cameras on, and that's the new horse, to flog. The old one was be here on time. Now the new one is turn your cameras on, and I get it. Some people are just literally rolling out of bed, and they're not made up yet. So, okay, sure, I get it. But I continue to encourage people to keep their cameras on, and I tell them, this is how we maintain our sense of community, that we can see each other, and then we've always had a greeting time at Valley View. So then it was, how do we adapt the greeting time for this? And so, finding creative ways to do that, and we can take 7 or 8 minutes online and say, hey, I see you, come online and, greet everybody, and, try to find different ways to do that, giving people like Pentecost Sunday, I encouraged people if they knew a different language, and obviously at Valley View it's very multicultural, so that's not a big problem. People speak a different language, come online this morning and say hello, the Lord bless you in another language. And so something creative to do. Not every Sunday say, okay, hello, 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 hello. We'll give them something different to do every Sunday to try to vary it up. So that's one of the ways that we've done that. I have been thinking about, and it's not something I've acted on yet. Well, something we did do that we did act on is we updated the contact directory and the photo directory that we have. That's a lot of work. And I've been avoiding doing it for a little while because I have to chase people, send me an updated photo, all that kind of stuff, right? And then I finish it, I send it around, and inevitably somebody's like, "Oh, you got this wrong." I'm like, "Yeah, okay. Thanks for telling me now. I've only been chasing you for a month and a half." And so anyways, we got those distributed via email. We're sending hard copies around. I've been telling people, this is so that you get to know each other, make use of it. You can contact each other. So encouraging people to do that on their own. Some people may not. I have been toying with the idea of doing an online or sending out an assignment to the congregation where it's those mixers, when you do a mixer when you're together with people, where it's like find someone who's 6'4", or find someone who's traveled to Alaska or something like that, and then they have to sign your paper. I've been toying with the idea of sending something like that around, and say, send texts and emails, or if you want to phone somebody or whatever, find people in the congregation who have done this kind of thing or whatever, and put their names down. There's a prize for the person who finishes it first or something like that. Or, find 3 people in the phone book whose first name begins with the letter of the last name of yours or something like that, and just send them a text and say hello and I'm praying for you or something. Just ways to kind of encourage people to randomly contact people in the congregation that they might not normally do that with. And so that is on the to-do list, to try to encourage people to mingle that way. Our facilities at Valley View, fortunately, the way our parking lot is set up and the exterior stairs with the garden boxes actually work very well for us to do some parking lot parties. And so as the weather dries up here, we're going to be looking at doing some parking lot events where we can get people together in their vehicles, or get families together in social distancing situations. Do that. So some of those things. Now, the other thing is that we do have, we've been able to keep our men's group going online like this. We've been able to keep our prayer team meeting online like this. But our small groups have not been meeting online, and that's also a decision of balancing, how much online stuff can people handle.
Yeah.
As the they're home. Some of them have, some of them are home with kids, and now they've got the kids at home all the time. They have to supervise the kids, and so people are, they're not going out, but some of them are really busy at home with all sorts of things. And so while we've been able to do worship and prayer and our men's group online, not everything has translated to being online, simply because people are, too much online, I guess. So I mean, I think Valley View's, we've maintained a good sense of community, or at least we've tried to. I feel like we have. I can't speak for everybody who's on the receiving end of it, and one of the things I guess I've seen too is that this has, if you can't log on Sunday morning to go to be a part of the church service, if you can't go online to do that, then I'm, it's. I think there's a few folks in the congregation here who we've, it's kind of revealed how much of a commitment they have to coming out to church. And I don't know, maybe they just, maybe they just don't like the online format. But if worship and the sense of community, and if the essence of what it is really important to you, then whether it's in person or whether it's online, you're going to make an effort to do that. And so to me, it's kind of like, if you can't, I mean, it's so easy just to click on a link on Sunday morning and sit there on your couch for an hour and a half. If you can't do that, then I don't know how much easier it could be for you. And so it'll be interesting when we start to get back. There may be some people who this will be the thing for them that says, I was, nah, not really worth it for me, right? And it'll show where their hearts are at on that issue. So we'll see where that comes out. So hopefully we can try to re-engage them, but yeah, I don't know if everybody's felt that same level of community or not.
Interesting thing that I feel you've also kind of missed is, by doing a video call, you are inherently adding more community. You kind of like alluded to it at a few points, but like, there's kind of a discussion or a decision that every church has to make. Do you stream on YouTube, or do you hold your service on Zoom or video calling? And that's a big conversation that many churches have had to do, where something like Zoom, you have quality problems, like you have your video freezes and stuff like that. Even in our call, like, your video occasionally freezes, and that's just a limitation of the technology. But something like YouTube, while you'll get a much higher production value, and it's easier to share with people because you can just send them a YouTube link and it's something they know and they can come to it at their own time. Maintaining community, you are limited to just like a chat log, a live chat, where while that's better than nothing, there's a community limitation there. So by going with the video calling, you're maintaining community in that way.
That's absolutely true.
Another thing that I thought was interesting that I really want to highlight of what you said is the banked credit on community, where churches who have a stronger sense of community are going to be able to go through this easier, and while they don't have as strong of a community, there's a pre-existing community, so you're not trying to create a community in a format that is limiting, but you're trying to maintain a community, and that just, it does a shift that is worth noting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's easier to do that. Easier to do that as a smaller church, where everybody kind of knows everybody, and it's a lot harder for people to fall through the cracks with that. So yeah, absolutely. The other thing that we have at Valley View too is our prayer team. Everybody in the church is divided up into groups, and members of the prayer team are responsible to contact them and see how they're doing and find out what they can pray for and stuff like that. So we've also encouraged our prayer team to be doing more of that these days. That's taken a higher emphasis to make sure we're staying connected with people, and that people don't fall through the cracks in that thing. So I guess the other thing that I do for building community too is that, in the absence of being able to physically greet everybody on the way out after the service. I've got the list of who logged in and when they logged in and how many times they had to log in and when they logged out. And so after the service on Sunday, I have to make sure that I communicate with all the volunteers who participated and say, hey, that was good job. Thank you. Because I can't do that in person. And it would be way too easy just to go, okay, that's done. And, shut the thing down, walk out, and I'm finished. Right. But I spend about an extra hour after the service sending texts around to people saying, thank you. Appreciate you helping out this morning. Worship leadership was good. Or, if I have to give them some other feedback on things, I can do that. And then I go through the attendance list of who was there and say, okay, I was able to physically greet these people because I saw their cameras online. I called them out. They said hello, but there's, here's all the list of the people who didn't come online to say hello, and I send them a text afterwards saying, hey, it was nice to see you at worship this morning. How are you doing? Hope you're doing. Have a great week, and just send them a text to let them know and acknowledge their being at worship, and then especially and then see if there's any visitors, any names I don't recognize, and hopefully they'll have left an email in there, and then I can send them an email to say, hey, welcome, good to have you with us this morning, and that sort of thing. So those are some additional things that I do as part of the service. That it's a little extra work, especially since I don't use smartphones, so it's more work for me to text. So I'm really loving my congregation by sending them texts because it's not easy for me to send texts.
I was going to make a joke about your flip phone and texting.
Yeah.
So another thing that I really want to discuss with you, and we're going to be a bit crunched on time, is
Sure.
how is your theology of worship being formed through this? Like, there's parts of our theology of worship where it's like, oh, I didn't realize that was a meaningful part in my theology, but now that I can't do it, that's something that I'm realizing is a part. And then you're also trying new stuff, so in a sense, your theology is being changed a bit. So, how is COVID addressing your theology of worship?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first area where it has significant implications of making people think about it is around celebrating the Lord's Supper, and whether that's been a challenge. I've my colleagues and I have been online posting and discussing things about that, and for me, the active work of the Holy Spirit in making the Lord's Supper what it is I've had to bring that out more, highlight that more, as we celebrate together, because we're not all, usually, because there's one body, one loaf, there's one body, right? Well, I've had to kind of flip that and reverse that around, because we're all taking separate cups and separate pieces of bread and whatever, so theologically speaking, there's nothing that's changed in terms of what I believe theologically, but practically speaking, I've had to work that in reverse. Whereas when you're gathered physically, everybody comes to the one body and takes the one loaf, takes a piece off of it, and that's the unifying thing, is that you've all drawn from the one body, the one loaf. In this one here, when we're doing it, I've had to kind of flip that around and say that when we have the prayer of invocation in the Lord's Supper, where I'm asking, not only to send your Spirit upon the elements to make them what they need to be for us, but also take all of these things that we have gathered and unite them together, so that it is that one body spiritually. And so I've had to kind of think through that a little bit as we've done that, that aspect of the Lord's Supper. I don't know if I would actually feel 100%, and I don't say this as a commentary on churches who've decided to do this, because I think pragmatism rules right now. In many respects, and a lot of people's theology is coming secondary, because in some sense, people, we know this isn't going to be a permanent change, but at the same time, I think it is good to think about some of these things theologically, because that's where a lot of times we start to slide off into error a little bit, is because pragmatism forces us to do something, and then we kind of we start doing something, and then eventually we end up believing what we do instead of doing what we believe. And so churches who are recording a service and then streaming it, or posting it later on, and then saying, take the Lord's Supper with us in this, I have a harder time with my understanding and theology of the Lord's Supper, sort of going, that's an okay way to do it. I don't think, if we were doing that, I don't think we would include the Lord's Supper in that. I think there's that sense of it needs the gathering together. It needs the church to be together in some way. And I think an online video meeting, in my opinion, meets that sort of minimum requirement of being able to be together in that way. And it's certainly, provisionally for now, relying on the Holy Spirit and highlighting that we can do this because of the Holy Spirit's work in making the elements what they are, and highlighting that. I think we're able to celebrate without necessarily running into the danger of celebrating it inappropriately, or allowing pragmatism to take precedence over correct understanding and theology. I have not yet had to do a baptism at this point, and so we'll probably wait with doing that. But yeah, if I had to do a baptism at this point, I think we probably would have just gathered them at the church in a very small gathering, and masks are appropriate, things like that, and I know, so I've seen some people do it with squirt guns, and I don't know if I'd do that. There's a sense in which you want to try to keep some of the respect. It can undo some of the significance of that, but I'm sure there's ways that you could, do that and keep a safe distance away from it and still be able to, have that work. So the other things in terms of theology, I think one of the benefits of this here, and certainly, it'd be interesting to see. I think the choice between format that churches have. Do you go for an online meeting, or do you post a streaming video? And maybe that choice is made for them simply by the fact that maybe that choice is made for them pragmatically. Okay, meaning that I know some of my colleagues, Valley View is a little different in terms of the church. We're not a primarily gray-haired congregation, but I know a number of my colleagues who are running primarily gray-haired congregations, and they can figure out how to watch a YouTube video, right? That technologically they can do that. Going on to an online meeting like this is a little bit more difficult, and we have a few folks in the congregation who struggle with that, and they've managed to figure it out. But if you had a predominantly gray-haired congregation who are having difficulty doing this, yeah, you might, the best thing to do is probably post something online that they can watch. It's better than nothing. But
I think also size comes into play there as well, because for a church the size of Valley View, you can do a video call and it's not this overwhelmingly huge thing. But bigger churches, a video call for their Sunday service, like something like First Alliance.
Yeah,
That's just
yeah,
a
yeah.
pointless video call because you'll get no community in something like that anyways.
Yeah, you're struggling with the same thing that you would be going there in person in some sense, where you've got 800 people there on a Sunday morning, right? And you walk in and you sit next to people. Every time you walk in, you're sitting next to new people. And so even in those larger churches that way, they're already, when they're meeting in person, they're already trying to deal with ways to tackle the issue of community and how well do people know each other and things like that. So there's there are challenges that they have to deal with there too. So but one of the theological things that I think this whole thing brings up, and it certainly has for us on a smaller scale, but I think it will for the larger churches on a larger scale as well too, is what level of production value makes church. And how much production value do you value over being able to connect and be in community with each other? And so I think the dividing line there really is, when the lack of production value or the technical issues interrupt that, then you have a problem because you're not connecting anymore because it's just so jerky and so annoying.
Yeah.
You can't follow and things like that. And directly related into that is um, and I think part of the reason why sometimes we choose the production value is because we and I love music as much as the next person does as well too, but I think this is a good thing in the sense that it's really going to challenge people's theological belief that music is equal to the sum total of worship. And anybody who's done a little bit of theology of worship or whatever will know music is an element of the worship service. But we misspeak when we say, oh, worship was good today, and what we mean is, well, the music and the singing was really powerful. And so I think this, for Valley View at least, music can't play the role that it used to play all the time in the service when we gather together. And so it's forcing us to look at what other elements there are to worship and how do we engage in them, right? And so right now we're doing a lot more with prayer, which is good, which is really good. And we all miss the music, absolutely. But I think it's not a bad thing that music has had to get knocked down a couple notches and force us to look at other things and say, well, what makes this a worship service? Is it just because I can't sing? And so, some people are really going to miss that. Other people won't as much, but that's a good theological reflection that's come out of this time together, I think, where we can't do that as much. So, and the other reason why I haven't done a lot of posting stuff online is because there's just so many other churches who are doing that, and we're doing that prior to this. I mean, there's sermons and people, and there's so much stuff online, and a lot of it, quite frankly, is better than what I'm able to produce.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to reinvent the wheel.
There was an interesting argumentation I heard on production qualities in churches. So it was, if you gotta bring your best to God. So if you know how to use a technology and you have the ability to, and that would help, but you choose not to, are you bringing your best to God? No, and therefore that is inadequate. And when I heard that argument, I haven't fully reflected on it yet, but I think that's an interesting point, is bring your best to God, and that's the production quality you should have.
Yeah, there's that can be a helpful motivator, I think, um, for people, as long as we realize that even our best needs to go through Jesus. We offer it to God through Christ as our service, um, and then that's good. Otherwise, that can become a bit of a performance level trap, right? That can shift something a little too easily into uh, into a performance trap. But yeah, absolutely. You know, we out of thankfulness and gratitude, we want to bring our best to the Lord in worship, and so that it does what it's supposed to do in the purpose of worship. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, we're roughly around the hour mark, so while I have more questions that I would love to talk about, let's kind of cap it off at an hour. So,
Sure.
thank you for joining me. Is there any way, if people want to connect with you and ask you more questions or something, is there a good way to connect with you?
Email is good, vvpc@telus.net. So Victor Peter Charlie at telus.net is an easy way to connect with me. And yeah, I'm happy to share more from our experience and what we've done through this time and where it's going. It's things aren't going to settle down anytime soon, and the opportunity to look at where this goes in the next number of months, and people may want to take this time to look at their churches and kind of go, as all of our energies and efforts have been going into worship, but is there other things that we can do as a church community apart from worshiping together, that we could shift some of our energy and effort to? So I know that's something we're looking at Valley View as well too.
Okay, thank you so much, Grant.
Thank you. It's an honor to come on and do this with you. Thanks for thinking of me.
You're welcome. Again, I want to thank Grant for joining me today. You had some great insights on theology of worship and how COVID is impacting the church, and also the tech to stream services in this time. I also want to thank Odom. He provided the music for my intro. I'm grateful for that. And I also want to thank you, those who've listened. This is a fun project I'm taking on, and I'm grateful for those who take the time to watch long format media like this. There's some great contributions, and so yeah, I'm grateful for that. Um, my next episode should be coming out in the next few days. I'm just finishing up editing. It's with Terry Faw, the chaplain of Ambrose, and that's another interesting episode. And yeah, I also want to hear from you, those who've listened to this. Ways for improvements, things that are doing well. Yeah, I'm very much starting with this, and while I'm still tweaking my setup, I also want to hear from you guys on what can be improved. So, thank you everyone for being a part of this.